Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to recap this week in cannabis news from August 23rd to the 29th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes to learn about the evolution of the industry over time, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we have a lot of developments this week that are very positive for the industry in time, so we're going to start with this one though, and it will be high priority as new Governor Kathy Hochul vows to launch New York's legal cannabis industry that Cuomo stalled on. And so for cannabis investors, we couldn't have asked for more positive news. Getting Cuomo out, the man who was blocking the progress, and getting a new progressive governor in. As scandal-scarred ex-governor Andrew Cuomo and the state's legislature approved the law back in March that legalized the sale of cannabis in New York, but Cuomo, locked into dispute with the state Senate, didn't nominate an executive director for the new Office of Cannabis Management or name appointees to the Cannabis Control Board, even though the Cannabis Taxation and Regulation Act was passed months ago. So basically, he didn't do his job. The Senate must confirm the appointments. So the appointments are necessary to set up and approve new rules and licensing for firms and employees in the emerging cannabis industry from cultivation to sales. Apparently, during negotiations over the cannabis appointments, Cuomo was embroiled in a separate spat with the legislature over top leadership changes he wanted to make at the MTA. He was ticked off after lawmakers blocked legislation to split the top MTA leadership positions into two posts, and a spokesperson even suggested the transit agency appointments and cannabis ones were linked. Hochul on Wednesday promised to clear that logjam, which is great, nominating and confirming individuals with diverse experience and subject matter expertise, merit also, who are representative of communities from across the state to the Cannabis Control Board is a priority for Governor Hochul, not government. The new governor's spokesperson, Jordan Bennett, told the Post, "We are looking forward to working with the legislature to keep the process moving forward," the Hochul rep said. And this is important because we want the progress to keep moving, not to stall. And since Cuomo's out of the way, that can happen in New York. So that's the best news we could have hoped for out of that state. While the Colorado governor urges senators to pass cannabis banking and tax reform before tackling legalization. So this is just more pressure from people in positions of power within the U.S. And the more pressure that we can put on the politicians and the leaders, the so-called leaders, the more likely we're going to see changes. The governor of Colorado on Friday sent a letter to the Senate sponsors the federal cannabis legalization bill, urging them to pass incremental cannabis banking and tax reform first before moving forward with the comprehensive legislation to end prohibition. As Governor Jared Polis is supportive of the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, a bill to deschedule cannabis and promote social equity that is being sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Ron Wyden, and Cory Booker, but he insisted that there are more modest and practical steps that should be taken first to support state legal markets and protect businesses. And we've heard this over and over again, but again, more pressure for more people is good in helping this change eventually come. I'm thrilled that you are bringing forward a long-term comprehensive solution that deschedules cannabis while enhancing social equity pathways, the governor wrote. I hope that you will first focus your efforts on the two biggest barriers to the success of the cannabis industry, banking and the IRS Code Section 280E. And so as someone that's been in a state with a mature market, he understands how the businesses have been affected by the fact that they can't bank, and they're leading them to be victims of armed robbery and a lot of attempted robberies, and then IRS Code Section 280E where they're paying more profits than any other business in the United States, which is just another form of discrimination. And of course, discrimination is just judging between two things. But the fact that cannabis companies have to pay 280E and no other business in the U.S. does just means that when you remove 280E, you're going to be treating them like every other business, and they're going to be keeping a lot more profits because they're paying less tax. So the latter statute has precluded state legal cannabis businesses from making federal tax deductions that are available to other traditional industries. Polis said that the Safe and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, which has passed in the U.S. House of Representatives on several occasions, has more bipartisan support than ever before and can be passed in a short term as you continue to work on the details of the CAOA. And this is great because this is what we want to hear. This is what we know. The Safe Banking Act already has the votes from what we've heard and from sources being CEOs in the cannabis space. Boris Jordan says the latest April 2022, Kim Rivers says Q1 2022, and it's really not that far away. So just to add, because this is all true, the cannabis industry is simply too large to be prohibited from banking opportunities, and the Senate must remedy this harm by bringing this measure up for a vote in the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs immediately, the governor wrote. Similarly, the cannabis industry has been stymied by 280E, which prevents these businesses from taking business-related deductions associated with the sale of cannabis, he continued. Congress must swiftly act to pass any measure, a number of which which have been introduced in past sessions to make an exception for legal cannabis businesses from 280E. While the CAOA would address this issue by descheduling cannabis, a narrow measure focused on relieving cannabis businesses from the detrimental effects of 280E would expeditiously solve this problem. Congress has the power and traction to address these inequities in the near term while continuing to refine the CAOA, and I encourage you to efficiently take an opportunity to pass legislation concerning banking or 280E. Now keep in mind, the letter is responsive to a public comment request from the senators on the draft legalization legislation, so the senators are asking for feedback. This governor is giving them the feedback that they want, and this comment period ends September 1st. So keep in mind, Schumer is set to unveil the official cannabis legalization bill sometime after September 1st, and so that's going to create a lot of buzz and positive sentiment for the space, I'd like to think, because when has a Senate Majority Leader ever introduced a full-scale legalization bill, especially when 91% of Americans agree with cannabis reform in some form? So it's a big deal, and I think when they asked for public comment, they might not have been expecting the governor of the most mature cannabis market in the entire country to respond with such an in-depth letter highlighting what has worked and what hasn't, and that passing safe is a priority to make, business operations for anyone in this industry safe so that they're not targets for robbery, but plus that incremental change is more likely than passing it all at once, especially when they don't have the votes. But I just want to use this to keep in mind, folks, we have a lot of positive things to come in the fall. As we enter this different season of the cycle, we have the Harvest and Trulieve merger that's going to close. We also have MSO earnings. So I do really believe we've gotten through the summer lull and that things are going to start to change in September and into the fall. And then we have this very timely visual from Brian Feroldi, who's a personal finance advocate with a large following on Twitter, but I just had to share this because it is so relevant and it introduces you to something that's well known, the 5 stages of a business life cycle. Now this is another one that I found somewhat relevant to the visual he showed. His is a little bit different, but if you take a look, you can find that this is a thing. Typically, businesses go through these 5 stages, so it's not like he's making this up. Now, why I want to bring this to you is because it's so relevant to US MSOs. And we're going to go through phase 1, research and development, or the price to hope ratio. And this is where they're like, well, could this idea even work? Can we create the proof of concept? Can we even create a market? The good thing about cannabis is there's always been a market. It's just been illegal. Whoops. It's just been illegal. Now we're moving into a legal market. Step 2 is launch. So this is where the business launches and tests out as proof of concept. And this is where we hope to see the revenue increase and the profit increase get to a point where you can actually break even. And this is where we look at the price to sales ratio to see whether the company is growing their revenues or sales compared to whether their price is growing at that same rate. And as we've seen, US MSOs, their price or their sales and revenues and profits are increasing, yet their share prices have been going down. What the heck? And that brings me to point out that it seems like most US MSOs are right here. And if you agree with that, based on everything you've seen from the data and the earnings I've showed you and from the videos you've watched, please comment below just to show your support and write safe only passes once. Because it seems like we're about to enter hyper-growth phase with MSOs. And just keep in mind, like, Green Thumb reported a positive net income, Cresco a positive net income, Trulieve a positive net income, Verano a positive net income, Curaleaf just missed a positive net income because they're expanding so big. But keep in mind, when these companies start to increase their revenues, and those grow quickly, especially when they're breaking even with their profits, and they're gaining profits as opposed to, still burning money, this is where they enter the hyper-growth phase, the price to gross profit ratio. So we're actually, instead of looking at EBITDA, we're looking at gross profit after everything's said and done. Well, it's sort of the same thing. But just wanted to show you that I feel like MSOs are right here. And if you think MSOs are right here too, based on everything you've seen, please leave a like on this video, because I think, as we head into the fall and as I do think that the trend is going to change. Now, again, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but everything is set up for this to happen. And, this is the decade that we're going to see ahead of us in time. And so with that, I just wanted to bring this timely tweet from Professor Bill Yinaire. Another MSO investor and member of the FinTwit community tweeted on August 24th, prediction. Just like last year at this time, Trulieve will start to take off now and continue through the fall. The difference this time, it won't come back down. Spring 2022 is going to be like a booster rocket. And I wholeheartedly believe that this is going to be the case because everything is set up for it. And if we take a look at this chart, we can see that from October last year, it ran to February when the Dems flipped the Senate, which no one expected they could have done, but they did. Now we've seen this healthy pullback and correction. But what you don't see in this chart is if you actually go back from September to March 2020, the lows when COVID hit and everyone was selling and we saw the fastest market crash ever, US MSOs were trading in single digits. So not only did they raise by double or triple their amount to get to this September high, then they kept going up into the fall of February, or into the fall, through the winter, into February, and now we've seen this healthy consolidation, and I do believe that we're preparing for another takeoff because this lines up perfectly with safe passing in Q1 of next year and eventual legalization, especially if the Dems want to keep power. That's one thing that they're going to need to use as a tool for the 2022 election. So just wanted to show you that. If you do agree, let me know in the comments why. If you don't agree, also let me know in the comments why. I want to have a discussion and try and poke holes, but ultimately I do think this is going to happen. That's why I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and that's why I made this channel, and hopefully I can help some of you capitalize as well. On to some MSOs, as Air Wellness announces 5% share buyback, the maximum allowed for CSE listed companies, and reaffirms their 2022 outlook. So this is big, announcing its board has authorized effectively immediately the repurchase of up to 5% of the company's subordinate voting shares, the maximum amount allowed for CSE listed companies over the next 12 months pursuant to a normal course issuer bid. And damn, if I had more cash, I would buy shares of Air, because I really like the fact that they're doing this, and I wish other MSOs would follow. Not to say that they have to, but this is just a move that instills confidence, because if you buy back shares, you reduce the amount of outstanding shares, and it increases the share price or the value for shareholders. Jonathan Sandelman, CEO of Air Wellness, said, "We have said time and time again that our stock is significantly undervalued, and we are drawing a line under that statement with today's share repurchase announcement. We expect this program to be used opportunistically and to commence immediately. The share repurchase program will in no way interfere with our ambitious growth plans to enter new markets and or complete our current capital projects. With more than $120 million of cash on our balance sheet and debt markets that are extremely attractive and open to us, we are confident in our ability to deliver on our stated goals and meet our 2022 guidance of $800 million in revenue and $300 million in adjusted EBITDA," Mr. Slenderman concluded. So that's great out of Air Wellness. Again, I would hope some MSOs will follow, not say that they have to, but this is leadership in some form. So I think this is great for Air Wellness shareholders, and just another example of what companies can do to benefit their shareholders as opposed to continue diluting them. On to this tweet from Kim Rivers. Just got to highlight this, how it started. Trulieve will be the market leader in Florida with 100 stores within the next 5 years. Thank you, universe, for protecting my investment, my baby, and my future dreams, Kim. This is amazing to think if Kim actually did write that down on paper. That was her goal. She put it in words to hopefully manifest that one day. How it's going 5 years later, according to her, opens their 100th store. You just gotta say, how cool is that? To write down your goal, then work at it, stick to it, and be able to announce that you've opened your 100th store 5 years later. Like, if that isn't leadership, I don't know what is. And this just goes to show that this must instill so much confidence in Kim that allows her to be the leader and be the change that she wants to see, which lets her go lead by example and, inspire all the people that she's around to be better people and be the change that they want to see as well. So if this doesn't inspire you, shit, I don't know what will. Especially when Trulieve is making efforts in trailblazing and doing things like this. Applications for a second annual expungement clinic are currently being accepted until September 10th. Their second annual free virtual expungement clinics. Do you have a criminal record in Florida? Is that record prohibiting you from getting a job or housing? You may be eligible for sealing or expunging of your record. So the fact that the government made it illegal and criminalized people for cannabis, it's Trulieve and these cannabis companies that are actually helping right the past wrongs of their government. It still doesn't want to take accountability or take the blame for putting the people in jail and giving them records. It should be the government's responsibility for helping expunge these records and getting people out of jail. But as we can see, US MSOs are leading the charge, not the government. Plus, on top of that, Cowen Financial Products, LLC, just provided an update on share ownership of Trulieve Cannabis Corp. So, Kim bought the dip, Cowen bought the dip. Did you buy the dip? I hope so, as Cowen Financial Products, LLC just filed a statement of acquisition of beneficial ownership, which is also known as a 13G. In the filing, which you can grab here if you want to check it out, the link will be below, it appears as though Cowen Financial Products claims to own 3,737,357 shares. This represents 5.21% of Trulieve Cannabis Corporation. So if we look at the industry as a whole and see only 3% of institutional ownership is in there, well, Cowen's just snagged up 5% of ownership of Trulieve. So they're confident in Kim and they want to invest in her in the long run. On top of that, the last bit of news around Trulieve, because I know this seems to be Trulieve focused. This is hilarious. The Trulieve employees charged with stealing $135K worth of cannabis from Midway distribution facility. Now, 2 employees from Trulieve's Midway facility were arrested after Gadsden County investigators said they stole upwards to $135,000 in medical cannabis that was later recovered in nearby communities. Marquise Brown and Sammy Carter were arrested Wednesday by the county sheriff's office and taken to county jail. Trulieve's loss prevention officials alerted officials to this theft. As much as you can be a business trying to inspire people around you like Kim, you've got 2 employees that decide, let's try and steal 10,000 grams of cannabis and have it not be noticed. Like, are you kidding? GSCO spokeswoman Lieutenant Angie Holmes said 10,000 grams of cannabis was stolen. Of that, about 75% was recovered in Gadsden County, with the rest found in Leon County. So they tried to take it out of state. Like, how hilarious is this? Based on the investigative interviews and information received from both subjects, the Gadsden County Sheriff's Office was able to recover 100% of the 100 grams of medical cannabis and turned it back over to Trulieve. So this is absolutely hilarious, but worth noting that it seems like Trulieve and Florida's law enforcement are on the same page enough to respect each other. But at the end of the day, Florida's gonna Florida. Onto the Office of Medical Cannabis Use, we can see that they added qualified patients up over 603,310. So this is actually an increase of 3,168. So we're seeing that pick up as we see the end of summer, which is positive. And as we can see, this is probably the most amount of stores that Florida is allowed to open up in any week that we've seen in a while, from August 23rd to 27th. So we got Liberty Health Sciences, Sanctuary Medicinals, Harvest, Vitican, and 3 more Trulieve locations. And on top of that, these are the best numbers we've seen out of Trulieve, selling 99 million milligrams of medical THC and then 40,000 kilograms of ounces of smokable flower. Those numbers are unbelievable, almost. I mean, they're just impressive. They're great. They're everything that we as investors want to hear. So this is great. Any other companies behind them too: Liberty Health Sciences, which is backed by Air Wellness, Surterra Wellness, Curaleaf, Ultimate Florida, which is Verano, Fluent, I don't know offhand. But more importantly, these numbers tell us that these MSOs are chugging along, growing, and seeing strong sales week after week as they recruit more patients. On to Curaleaf. They are ready to serve New Jersey's growing market with a new Bordentown location. As today they announced the opening of Curaleaf Bordentown, the company's 109th dispensary nationwide. The company also announced the launch of Select brand in New Jersey, expanding the brand's reach to 19 states. Select Bites, which feature the brand's award-winning concentrated broad-spectrum oil and science-based formulations that offer precise, consistent cannabis experiences for any occasion, are now available at all Curaleaf New Jersey locations. While this Curaleaf Bordentown is a 9,500 square foot dispensary located at 191 Route 130 and is the second location that Curaleaf has opened in the state this year, but all 3 of Curaleaf's New Jersey dispensaries are strategically positioned near the New York and Pennsylvania borders, allowing the company to better serve the growing East Coast adult use market. Because if New Jersey's online first, you know folks from New York and Pennsylvania are going to be heading there to buy their legal cannabis. And starting on August 25th, Curaleaf Bordentown will offer swag bags for the first 500 patients through the door and a 20% discount on first purchases throughout the first 2 weeks of opening. Additionally, Curaleaf will make a donation of $5,000 to Habitat for Humanity of Burlington and Mercer counties, and is committed to volunteering to help build homes in the area in October. So you gotta love that. MSOs are giving back to the communities that they invest in. While we have this news out of Pennsylvania, medical cannabis sales sizzle in Pennsylvania, and the M&A market has been busy. So we're going to reference someone's story. As James Thomas's hip began to bother him 3 or 4 years ago after he had joint replacement surgery, he turned to medical cannabis and is still testing out the right formulation. "I haven't found the right cannabis yet," the 69-year-old retired heavy equipment operator from Wilkinsburg said. He's tried a spray and smoking flower, a consumer preference. "Let's just say it was kind of mellow, and the spray was about the same," he said. "It made me a lot friendlier, smiling, cracking jokes, maybe even talking more than I usually do. It's always lifted me up." It also eased his hip pain, he said. Those all sound like very positive effects compared to opioids. Thanks to consumers like Mr. Thomas and the prospect of legalized cannabis for recreational use in the state, Pennsylvania's pot industry is on a roll. The market has reached $3.4 billion in total sales since 2018. According to the state's Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, dispensaries have generated $2 billion of those sales. Again, this is just since 2018. Since cannabis was legalized in Pennsylvania for treatment of serious medical conditions in 2016, 633,000 patients and caregivers have signed up to date, as purchase requires a doctor's prescription. And if recreational cannabis gets legalized in Pennsylvania, sales could quickly more than double if Illinois' experience is any guide. So keep in mind, it's very positive that Pennsylvania already has more patients than Florida, and they're seeing very fast medical growth and anticipating just as much or more growth when the adult use opens up. Now keep in mind though, Cantor Fitzgerald analyst Pablo Zuanic doesn't think that'll happen before the first quarter of 2025 because the state's Republican-controlled legislature has not shown much interest. But the legalization of recreational use in nearby states, New Jersey and possibly Maryland, could force the legislature's hand, Mr. Zuanic wrote to investors, because again, if you don't legalize and other states around you have, your citizens are going to go to that state and give tax dollars to other states, which is not a good thing if you're a politician. That doesn't help you get reelected. So the bad news is without legal recreational use, the increasing numbers of dispensaries in Pennsylvania, 131 are open now, will dampen overall sales, Mr. Zuanic wrote. However, the silver lining for consumers of having more states is lower prices, said Johns Collins, director of the state's Office of Medical Cannabis. More outlets are creating more competition. He said at Tuesday's board meeting, you would expect that to happen. But at the same time, for instance, as sales have boomed, the retail price of gram of medical cannabis fell to $14.53 in July, down from $15.67 a gram in January. So obviously lots of moving parts and different factors. So the more stores that open, more prices are going to fall. But the longer that this Republican-controlled legislature that does not see all of the clear benefits of cannabis, the longer it's going to take for them to get an adult use market online. But again, the sooner that states like New York and New Jersey get their adult use programs online, the sooner Pennsylvania is likely going to be forced to follow as well. So they're all playing off of each other's hands. Great news, though, as this just highlights that we're seeing strong growth, like in Florida, also in Pennsylvania. While we've got this from Todd Harrison, so thank you, Todd, for providing this. Camilo gets it, highlighting BTIG on New Jersey. And this person must just be a very big John Bon Jovi fan with all these references, but we're going to read through it. So no need to be reckless about New Jersey. Adult use regulations, a boon to incumbents. MSOs are living on more than a prayer. What you should know, last Thursday, the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission approved initial rules for the state's recreational cannabis program. As there has been a bit of confusion regarding the interpretation of these regulations and what they will mean for licensed cannabis operators in the state once rec sales have launched, we hear potentially this November, if not early 2022. So that is big. We thought we would clarify some details that clearly point to incumbent MSOs as having a significant advantage over future entrants for at least the next 18 to 24 months. So for the next 2 years, February 23 or the earliest, so that's a big deal, and why Tier 1 MSOs are going to benefit the most. The bottom line is that for New Jersey to have a successful legal cannabis program that can adequately meet unrelenting demand while also supporting social equity participants, it will need the help of a well-capitalized, successful incumbent operators that can produce quality product at scale. As such, we believe Green Thumb, Curaleaf, Verano, TerraSend, Columbia Care, and Air Wellness are best prepared MSOs that all currently operate in New Jersey's medical market are incredibly well positioned to leverage New Jersey's adult use sales ramp into 2022. We have yet to see a state legalized cannabis sales be bad medicine for the incumbent operators, another John Bon Jovi reference, and as such, we suspect New Jersey's rec market will be born to run. There's a third one. Then, wanted dead or alive. Fourth, existing operators listed above may enter the rec market upon receiving municipal approval and can operate vertically integrated operations immediately, while new entrants must wait until February 2023 to cultivate, manufacture, retail, and deliver concurrently. Until then, they cannot cultivate, manufacture, and retail at the same time. Not sure how positive that is for the social equity applicants, but I guess the leadership should have thought this through before holding out on SAFE for so long. In addition, existing operators are permitted to cultivate up to 150,000 square foot of canopy, the maximum permitted in the rec market, the same canopy limit for Tier 4 cultivator license holders. Dancing in the dark, another one, not surprising. 71% of NJ municipalities, as per reports from the New Jersey Herald, opted to ban cannabis businesses from operating in their areas. Guess they don't know that house values go up when you actually allow dispensaries in your area. They've got a lot to learn because they don't actually look at the new data that's come out from states that legalize. Regardless, given the August 21st deadline to enact a ban of cannabis businesses only 2 days after the initial NJCRC rules came out, we believe many municipalities who actually support recreational use are simply giving themselves more time to review adult use regulations and develop local rules to regulate adult use in their areas, especially since they can simply opt back in at any time to permit cannabis operations. Conversely, once having opted out, they cannot opt out for 5 years. Conversely, once having opted in, they cannot opt out for 5 years. So it just makes sense. Don't opt in yet because then you can opt in after, versus if you opt in, you can't opt out for 5 years. And lastly, Glory Days. Grandfather clause widens moats for incumbent MSOs as discussions with our industry contacts lead us to believe a number of municipalities that opted out have passed or will pass local ordinances protecting the operations of the incumbent alternative treatment care or dispensaries already existing in those places where they've opted out, thus permitting them to operate in the adult use market, which creates a protective moat for current operators. So on page 2, we detail adult use licensing rules and the power of the municipalities to regulate recreational use in their area. So if you are one of the Terra Ascend or Curaleaf or Green Thumb Industries dispensaries already operating in one of these municipalities where they voted to opt out, you get to still operate there and you don't have anyone coming to compete against you. So that is this moat that they're talking about. And that is a big deal, again, for any MSO that's already in there. So that would be great. While on top of that, Texas law expanding medical cannabis takes effect September 1st. So this is a small victory, but still a victory for the veterans and the people who need medical cannabis in Texas. A law that will expand the use of medical cannabis use in Texas is going into effect on September 1st. The expanded law under the compassionate use of medical cannabis will now be open for people like veterans who suffer from PTSD, cancer patients, and other medical conditions. According to Dr. Goju, there's still a process that has to be followed, as you'd go to your primary care physician and you'd talk about the condition you have and see if it's a viable option for you. It may or may not be a viable option for you, he said. So regardless, the fact that you can now get access to medical cannabis for PTSD, cancer patients, and other medical conditions is big. It's going to save more lives and reduce overdoses in Texas as well. So that's great news. On top of that, top federal drug official admits legalizers were right about teen cannabis use and touts psychedelic therapeutic potential. This is just ridiculous, though, because it goes to show that people heading these big organizations clearly doubt that legalization is going to have the effect that it does, and their ignorance is delaying the progress that we're seeing from states that took the charge earlier. The head of a federal drug agency acknowledged in a new interview that cannabis legalization has not led to increased youth use despite her prior fears, and she spoke about the therapeutic potential of certain psychedelics that have long been deemed dangerous under federal law. Yeah, again, it's not dangerous, it's just complete misunderstanding of the substances. National Institute on Drug Abuse Director Nora Valco discussed a wide range of drug policy issues on a podcast hosted by a longtime legalization advocate that was pushing on Thursday, including the need to shift from a punitive approach to drugs to one that treats addiction as a public health matter. Volko said on Drug Policy Alliance founder Ethan Nadelman's show that she was expecting the use of cannabis among adolescents to go up when states moved to legalizing cannabis, but admitted that overall it hasn't. It was reform advocates like Nadelman who were right about the impact of the policy changes on youth, she said. She also acknowledges that changes to cannabis laws are having a broader range of diverse impacts, saying that some states that have legalized actually have better outcomes. Actually, all states, provinces, and countries that have legalized have had better outcomes. And if you look at the data, you will see the evidence is all there. While the adverse effects of cannabis use are much worse in some states. This is just a lazy answer because she's saying, well, this, while that, and not just giving any detail where it's like, yeah, well, the adverse effects of cannabis are much worse in some states that have not reformed their cannabis laws. So it's just seems like she is lazy in answering and has not looked at the data. Obviously, as the head of a big agency, she's not trying to give any specific answers. She's trying to be as vague as possible, but it just doesn't help her case because it seems like she just has not looked at the data either. And hopefully she does, because that will help her make better decisions for Americans sooner than later. On to this news from Canada, as British Columbia is considering cannabis consumption lounges. Yes, preliminary talks between the province and cannabis industry are underway, says UBCM. So this is still very early. They're just getting into talking, but this is better than nothing. As a statement Wednesday, the Union of BC Municipalities explains the province is looking into the possibility of allowing cannabis consumption spaces. The BC Cannabis Secretariat plans to engage broadly with key stakeholders, including UBCM's Cannabis Policy Technical Working Group, in the fall with formal public and stakeholder engagement in 2022, reads the statement. So likely won't hear more about this development until 2022. But this is very positive because, again, if we have bars where you can consume alcohol, why not have bars where you can consume cannabis as well? And as we're seeing that happen in Nevada and Michigan, we're seeing it happen in Canada finally. Yes! So that is great. Hopefully that leads to something positive. In progress, as South Africa also crafts strategy for US $1.9 billion cannabis industry. South Africa's government unveiled a master plan aimed at harnessing a 28 billion rand, 1.9 billion cannabis industry that could potentially create as many as 25,000 jobs. Just 25,000? Come on, I think you can create more jobs than that and help attract foreign investment. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development led a 2-year process to craft a national strategy for the industrialization and commercialization of the plant. The document incorporated lessons learned from major cannabis producers, including the US, Canada, Mexico, and China, it said. Establishment of the cannabis industry will lead to diversification of the economy and thus increase economic growth, create jobs, and for poverty alleviation, the department said Wednesday at a presentation to lawmakers. It identified legislative restrictions and threat of takeover or dominance by well-funded companies and pharmacy groups as the main challenges to the industry. So yeah, you got to create the cannabis industry to compete with the pharmacy industry that thinks that they can keep it illegal and continue to crush it. And I actually used to live in South Africa for about 4 months, and it was just a difficult reality shock and culture shock for myself as a Canadian, and knowing that the unemployment rate was some 26% there. So 1 in 4 people don't have a job. Think about how difficult it can be when 1 in 4 people don't have work, right? So The plan envisages encouraging the cultivation of hemp and cannabis with applications ranging from medicine to food and to recreational use. It endeavors to increase the volumes and variety of cannabis produced for local and export markets within an effective regulatory and legal system. South Africa legalized cannabis for personal use in 2018. So this is great news, and I do hope that they can develop this market sooner than later. So great job, South Africa, and I really hope you can use this positively to create more opportunity for your citizens. Well, lastly, a portfolio update, as I did buy more Cresco and I wanted to share with you all, as I've gotten my total share count up to 2,800, and I have now 45,200 invested in Cresco Labs, and I could not be happier with my position because I do believe that those shares are going to be worth a lot more in the future. And so on Thursday, the price, from Tuesday to Friday, the price did not move much, and it was sitting around $12.33 most of the day, and I had this opportunity from Tilray, especially because I said I'll sell anything over $17 for Tilray. That way I'm not being greedy, and I'm using some of these profits that I've already made from Tilray to reinvest into Cresco that will get me returns in the future. Now, Tilray for most of the day was sitting below 17. It jumped up to 17.18. I made the execution, and then it jumped back down below 17 for the rest of the day. So I felt lucky, and what this allowed me to do is actually get my share count of Cresco up to 2,800. Now, I just want to show you, though, if we look at July 15th, when I did the last portfolio update, I had a market value of $76,922, total equity of $82,300 with cash of $5,300. And I was waiting to buy more Cresco around $12 if it were to dip that low. Now, sadly, when the earnings came out, I was like, man, these are so good that what if it doesn't fall lower? And I don't want to miss that opportunity by being greedy and being cheap and, waiting for pennies. So I invested at $5,300 around $13.78. And so that got my Cresco share count up to 2,500, which was my goal. But I did not break through the 16 price range into the 15, which I really did also want, because obviously the lower you can get your price, the more your shares will be worth in the future when the price continues to go up. But just highlighting that from this point in July 15th, where things looked like they were going back up, my total equity was at 82,300. And then after this, what looked like a month of red hell, which was very tough, especially if you've never been through it before, my total equity now, as of today, is only 74,000. So I feel much better about this, especially because I've increased my position in Cresco, and I'm still sitting very healthily at 74,000. So as you can see here, this is the breakdown of my portfolio, but I'm so happy that I've got 2,839 shares of Cresco now at $15.92 a share. Obviously, it'd be nice to have it at $12, but the closer Cresco gets back up to $15.92, I'm just going to make this money back. And then when it goes to the $20 range and the $30 range into those price targets, based on the safe, re-rating, and all of this to come, then I'm just going to be laughing. But ultimately, I want to give you some context as well. These Harvest shares are going to convert to Trulieve, and I'm going to keep those for a very long time. Now, my Goodness Growth shares, they were actually previously Vireo shares at $3.75, and so this has clearly been my worst investment, most likely. But again, it's just a lesson, and you don't lose until you sell, so I can wait until it gets better and then sell eventually. But Goodness Growth is essentially going to be what I sell in order to cover my rent and living expenses for 2022. Because once the tide turns, the rising tide does lift all ships, and Goodness Growth is going to go back up to likely 282, likely 375, where I invested my 10,500 at. So as you can see, it's taking a crushing amount, but you don't lose if you don't sell for a loss. I'm confident that Goodness Growth is still going to get back above $3.75, where it was in February, and that I'll be able to sell that cash out to pay for my rent and expenses for the 2022 year. But worst case scenario, if for whatever reason these companies trade sideways for the next 6 to 8 to 12 months, which I don't think they're going to do, the fundamentals are too good for smart investors to ignore, and I cover this week after week. There's so much happening, and all this change is coming, and we're heading into that change now. Then worst case scenario, though, if they were to trade sideways, I would liquidate all of my Tilray shares, and that would allow me to cover my rent and expenses for the next 8 to 12 months without having to go find a job where I'm making someone else rich. This way I can do my thing, keep investing. Plus, I've still got a little over $11,000 in my checking account right now, which will tide me over for rent and expenses probably until March or April of next year. So that's not something I'm going to seriously need to consider until January of next year. Where at that time, I do believe that these investments are going to be worth a lot more than they are now. But ultimately, the whole goal is just so that when the tide does turn, I'm going to trim some Goodness Growth, probably some TBP, and probably some Tilt, trim some of those lower ones just to get cash back so that next year, 2022, I have enough cash to cover my rent and expenses, to keep doing what I'm doing this and, putting my time into making music so that I especially do not have to get a job, which is in turn me using my energy to work for someone else to make them rich. Yeah, no, I'm not getting back into that mind of thinking. I am making sure I manage my capital well enough so that I will always be my own boss and that I do not have to go work for someone else. And so hopefully me sharing this has been helpful in any sort of form, not advice or anything like that, but it's just me sharing my thought process and what I'm doing, what my plan is, in hopes that it might help you create a better plan for yourself and make better financial decisions in time. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What do you think of the stories I mentioned, and do you think that we're going to see a positive season ahead for cannabis in the fall? Let me know in the comments whether you do or don't, but please provide some facts or reasoning as to why so that we can have a discussion. Besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great day, everybody.